You ask anyone who invented the nuclear bomb. Most people will say it was the United States of America. Some people will say it was Oppenheimer. They are wrong. The first nuclear bomb was built in the United States. Oppenheimer was in charge of all areas of construction. Such is the power of the victors. This is the invention of the nuclear bomb. Leo Szilard was waiting to cross the road near Russell Square in London when the idea came to him. It was the 12th of September 1933. A little under 12 years later, the United States dropped an atom bomb on Hiroshima, killing an estimated 135,000 people. The path from Szilard's idea to the deadly realization is one of the most remarkable chapters in history of science and technology. It features an extraordinary cast of characters, many of them refugees from fascism who were morally opposed to the bomb, but driven by the dreadful prospect of Nazi Germany getting there first. Szilard himself was a Hungarian-born Jew who had fled Germany for the UK 2 months after Adolf Hitler became Chancellor. He arrived in a country that was then at the forefront of nuclear physics. James Chadwick had just discovered the neutron, and the Cambridge physicists soon split the atom. They broke a lithium nucleus in two by bombarding it with protons, verifying Albert Einstein's insight that mass and energy were one and the same, as expressed by the very famous equation E equals mc squared. Szilard's eureka moment was based on this groundbreaking experiment. He realized that if you could find an atom that was split by neutrons and in the process emitted 2 more neutrons, then a mass of this element would emit vast amounts of energy in a self-sustaining chain reaction. Szilard himself pursued the idea with little success. It wasn't until 1938 the breakthrough came, ironically in the Nazi capital Berlin, where German physicists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann bombarded uranium atoms with neutrons. When they analysed the debris, they were stunned to find traces of the much lighter element barium. As luck would have it, Hahn and Strassmann were opponents of the regime. Hahn wrote to Austrian chemist Lise Meitner, who had worked with him in Berlin until she fled to Sweden after the Nazis occupied Vienna in 1938. Meitner wrote back explaining the uranium nucleus was splitting into roughly 2 equal parts. She called this process fission. The next piece of the puzzle came when Italian physicist Enrico Fermi, who had fled fascism, was working at Columbia University in New York. He discovered that uranium fission released the secondary neutrons that were needed to make the chain reaction happen. Szilard soon joined Fermi in New York. Together, they calculated that a kilogram of uranium would generate as much energy as 20,000 tons of TNT. Szilard already saw the prospect of a nuclear war. There was very little doubt in my mind the world was headed for grief, he later recalled. Others did have their doubts. In 1939, Danish physicist Niels Bohr, who was actively helping German scientists escape via Copenhagen, poured cold water on the idea. He pointed out that uranium-235 would not emit secondary neutrons. However, Szilard remained convinced the chain reaction was possible and feared that the Nazis knew it too. He consulted fellow Hungarian émigrés Eugene Wigner and Edward Teller. They agreed that Einstein would be the best person to alert Roosevelt to the danger. Einstein's famous letter was soon sent after the outbreak of war in Europe, but it unfortunately had little effect. Things changed dramatically in 1940 when news filtered through that 2 German physicists working in the UK had proved Bohr wrong. Rudolf Perls and Otto Frisch had worked out how to produce uranium-235 in large quantities, how it could be used to produce a bomb, and what the appalling consequences of dropping it would be. Perls and Frisch, who Bohr had helped escape, were also horrified at the prospect of a Nazi bomb and in March they wrote to the British government urging prompt action. Their memorandum on the properties of radioactive superbomb was more successful than Einstein's letter to Roosevelt. It led to the initiation of the British bomb, codenamed Tube Alloys. The letter also galvanized the US into action. In April 1940, the government appointed veteran physicist Arthur Compton to head a nuclear weapons program, which eventually became the Manhattan Project. One of his first moves was to bring various chain reaction research groups under one roof in Chicago. That summer, the team began a series of experiments to make the chain reaction happen. The bombing of Pearl Harbor in December 1941 added a further impetus. A year later, the Manhattan Project team was ready to attempt a chain reaction in a pile of uranium and graphite they had assembled in a squash court underneath a stand of the University of Chicago's football field. On Wednesday, the 2nd of December 1942, they did it. The celebrations were muted. Once the reaction was confirmed, Szilard shook hands with Fermi and said, "This will go down as a black day in the history of mankind." Over the next 4 years, the United States, the United Kingdom and Canada poured vast resources into the Manhattan Project. Tube Alloys continued for a while, but was eventually absorbed into the US project. The Nazis initiated a nuclear weapons program, but it made little progress. On the 16th of July 1945, the United States detonated the world's first nuclear bomb in the New Mexico desert. The test was final, terrible proof that nuclear energy could be weaponized, and prompted Robert Oppenheimer to recall a passage from Hindu scripture: "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."